is watching this to go ahead and plan on bringing some questions. We're going to do whatever we want as far as the direction of this. But I really want to, excuse me, well, great way to start with a frog in my throat. Anyhow, as we wait for a few people to hop on here, the whole idea behind today's live broadcast, behind today's stream in the first place, is to answer some of these questions that have been popping up a lot with people lately, and that's surrounding the world of what happens when you've been intermittent fasting for a while and suddenly you sort of reach these plateaus, right? Because you can't simply just fast more, right? This is not exactly the best way to do it. You can't just say, oh, I'm no longer losing weight, so I'm going to, instead of fasting for 16 hours a day, I'm going to fast for 22 hours a day. If you were to continue to do that, obviously, you would reach a point in which you're fasting forever. So, how do we go about actually implementing ways to get more benefit out of our intermittent fasting if we're already fasting? Like, what are we supposed to do? Now, with this, I'm going to open it up for questions as time goes on. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this, can you go ahead and comment where you're watching from? I'll try to shout some people out as much as I can. I saw Kansas is in the house. Ellie Goldstein, what's up? Going good to see you, man. We got Rahana, good to see you. Let's see, we've got, wow, this is awesome. We got Nickel, we got St. Louis in the house. We've got Ranley, we've got Texas, we got Moscow, we've got Montana. Someone says, am I fighting a cold? About 2 weeks ago, we got this weird little chest thing that went around with my kids, and it's been going around Southern California. So yeah, it's a little bit left in me. Anyhow, we got Portugal in the house. We've got Grand Haven, Michigan. We've got New York. We've got Florida. We've got Alaska in the house. We've got New York, Surprise, Arizona. All right, let's go ahead and let's hop right into this because we are looking good. Okay, it's kind of glitching there for a second. All right, now I think we're good. So I'm going to jump right into this. Okay, so the first thing that we have to remember is that when your metabolism sort of adjusts to something, it's not as simple as say, okay, let's just decrease calories more, right? In very simple terms, that would work, but with fasting, it's a little bit of a different situation. I know I'm kind of repeating myself here, but you're already fasting. Like, what are you supposed to do? First step, if you've reached a plateau, is going to be, okay, let's assess how much we are fasting first, and then let's break down how much time we should take off to sort of reset so that fasting remains this anomaly, so to speak. One of the things that's interesting is if you look at the research, a lot of times it takes about 8 weeks for the body to adjust to a new kind of diet. Okay, and what I mean by that is after about 8 weeks, the body starts to sort of adjust to the new caloric intake. And what I mean by that is after 8 weeks, your metabolism resets to where you are currently dieting to. So what do we do with that? Do we need to take an 8-week break to get it to reset to a higher level? No, most of the literature shows that really just taking like a 2 or 3 week break will allow a little bit of a reset. Okay, so what exactly do I mean by that if you're saying take 2 weeks off? It doesn't mean you go take 2 weeks and you start eating a bunch of garbage, right? That's not the idea. You take 2 weeks and you start eating at your maintenance calories. So let me explain how that looks. Just to say, if you start your diet and you lose 50 pounds, okay, 50 pounds is a lot of weight to lose. But with that 50-pound weight loss, you're going to obviously bring your metabolism down, right? So your new metabolic, sort of resting metabolic rate is going to be lower because you weigh less. So what that means is that you'd have to start decreasing calories more and more and more. Now, if you were to continue to do that forever, as I mentioned, you would be in eventually just this extreme deficit that would put you at a plateau. That might be where you're at right now. That's what happens to a lot of people that do intermittent fasting for long periods of time. Okay, but this 2-week break, you need to bring your calories back up to maintenance for where you are at now. So that doesn't mean that you go back to eating what you were eating before. It means that you bump up your calories a little bit, maybe 10, 20%, and you do that for about 2 weeks. Now, you can do this with or without fasting. Okay, that's the thing. People get in such a rut with fasting because it's so simple and it's so easy from a lifestyle perspective that you could just rock and roll for a long time and not really calculate and think about what you're doing, right? But when you are really trying to get granular and you're stuck, you do need to analyze where you are at. So one of the things that I recommend is I say, take 2 weeks, commit to taking 10 days to 2 weeks, maybe take a little bit of a break from fasting if you really want to, or if you need to go ahead and actually just increase your calories along with your fasting, that is fine too, right? So let's kind of put that aside for a second. I'm sure there's some questions that are going to come up with this. Any questions surrounding the world of like how much fasting you should do, when should you take a break, kind of anything within that category before we start going into the next sort of tip. Because with this whole breaking a plateau thing, there's a lot of different things that we can talk about and a lot of different pieces there. Let's see. Sorry, these headphones are kind of getting weird. Okay. All right. How do you deal with the food cravings when you're alone or for hours working from home? Actually, let me jump into a question that's a little bit more relevant with this right now. Let's see. Someone says, when should you take a break from 16/8 fasting? Okay, with 16/8 fasting, that's the interesting thing. And I talk about this a lot in a number of my videos. 16/8 fasting is essentially just skipping breakfast every day, right? So with that, I do think that it's important that you back off of that a little bit. I think that probably one of the more dangerous ways to get into this rut. I don't mean that 16/8 is dangerous. What I mean by that is you get yourself into a situation where it's so comfortable and so easy, and trust me, I've been there before, that it's really difficult to reduce the calories or pay attention, right? Because you're living your life. So what I would suggest if you're doing 16/8 is that when you get to this point where you need to take a 2 week break and you're doing 16/8 every day, cut your 16/8 back to like 3 or 4 days per week for 2 weeks and then jump back into it. So kind of get yourself in a pattern of like 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And whether you're fasting or not is entirely up to you. Let's see, someone says, oh, Mike, awesome. Thanks for the super chat, man. I lost 200 pounds in the last 2 years. That's awesome. I'm glad my videos have been able to help you with that. So I have a question. Are you going to continue with your workout videos and your garage gym channel? Really thought they were the best. Hope, you know, it's one of those things where I created this other channel called Garage Built Life. That was like all my workout stuff and things like that. It just totally dogged. It totally bombed. It just did not do well. And it's kind of one of those things where the old saying, feed the stallion, starve the pony. At a certain point, I'm like, okay, do I commit to this channel that's going nowhere? Or do I feed the beast that's actually working? So anyhow, Ray Brad says it sounds like snake oil. Okay. Fasting sounds like, okay, interesting. Jacob says, sorry, what's the secret to losing weight and getting ripped? You know, with that, I don't want to sound totally generic here, but I think, you know, the biggest sort of tip that I usually tell people is it all comes down to your brain. And I think the reason that a lot of you are here with the fasting side of things is that fasting satisfies this area of our brain that allows us to really keep our food intake in check. And I wish there were secrets, but we have to find what works for us. And I'm talking to a community here of people that like to fast that really understand that and really get that. Okay, Glenn says, can I break a fast with chopsticks? Actually, yes. I would typically recommend if you're eating like a chopstick, they have the beef ones and they have the turkey ones. This is going to sound like super nitty gritty, but I really like breaking a fast with turkey versus beef and then having the beef come in later. The reason is turkey's super high in phosphorus. Okay, and phosphorus is something that we actually deplete quite a bit when we're fasting, especially if it's a longer fast. Okay, so going that route, that would probably be the one that I would say. I say get like the turkey sticks, things like that. Okay, anyhow, I kind of want to move into another category of sort of breaking through these plateaus. This is actually something that I talked about in a video just the other day. But the way the YouTube algorithm works is sometimes like you have this video that you're so excited to get out, you're so excited that it's going to crush, and then it just goes nowhere. And it really is like totally algorithmic. It's just one of those things where you just catch it at the wrong time. So I want to address this. This is talking about divvying up and mixing up your eating periods, okay? Before I dive into this, anyone that's watching, can you guys please hit that thumbs up button? It really does help out a lot. It helps this video kind of get up there so that people on the channel see it. So if you can see that like button, you see that thumbs up button, please just give it a big tap for me and try to get this like content up so that it gets served to people that are watching this video. I know we have 500 people on this, so this is great. Okay, so what I mean by switching up your eating periods, let me kind of paint a picture. Most people that are fasting are skipping breakfast. Nothing wrong with that, right? So you're kind of in this situation where your body is used to eating lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what I am suggesting is that maybe you're leaving some figurative stuff on the table by not skipping dinner occasionally. So what I like to do is when I get in a rut and I feel like I need to sort of instill some different like effects upon my body, I will switch up when my fasting period is, and I'll switch up when my eating period is. So maybe one week I'll do traditional intermittent fasting where I'm skipping breakfast and I'm eating lunch and dinner. And then maybe the next week I will try something where I'm doing it a little bit different, right? Where maybe I'm fasting through dinner. So I'm skipping dinner, but I'm eating breakfast and lunch. A lot of different reasons behind this, right? The reason that I'm suggesting in terms of a plateau is we never know what kind of hormonal effect or what kind of metabolic effect we are getting from a fast at a specific point in time. So with that, we could be having a lot of potential by being fasted through the evening time and then waking up in the morning in a deeper fasted state, especially if you're someone that works out in the morning, right? So I mentioned this in that video, but think about this for a second. Okay, you stop eating at, let's say, just 3 days a week, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., okay? You go to bed a little bit hungry, which might kind of suck, but then you wake up the next day and you're deeper in a fast, okay? And if you're deeper in that fast and then you work out in the morning, you're effectively working out really deep in a fast, which might have some better metabolic effects, right? So it's just something to consider to rotate up your eating periods. We're not talking about something that needs to be gospel forever. We're talking about something that you want to do to switch it up when you're in a jam, right? You're in this situation where you're not breaking through this plateau. It's frustrating. You've been trying to lose weight, okay? Now, I know that people are, on this broadcast with all different walks of life, right? Like people that need to lose weight, people that don't need to lose weight. But one of the things that I remember the most was when I was losing weight, I would reach these periods of time where it would be extremely frustrating, because that is the interesting thing with fasting is what more levers can you pull, right? And you can start getting kind of crazy and saying like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to eat this with my fast, I'm going to eat that with my fast. But at the end of the day, it just becomes frustrating. And I've been there, and that's exactly why I wanted to do this video. So far, for those of you that have jumped on, we've kind of talked about two things. I'm going to open it up to questions here in just 1 second. We talked about number one, okay, being you got to take some time off. And it's simple, but what I really recommend, to recap, 8 weeks on, 2 weeks pretty aggressively off, but not eating crap, not eating garbage, not making your calories high, just bringing them up slightly, okay? 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The next thing I just talked about was rotating your eating periods, okay? So that when you're fasting at different times. You're mixing it up. For lack of a better term, you're keeping the body guessing. And I know I've had some questions. Hang on a second. There's a lot of good questions that have come through. Okay, so now, let's see, it's really difficult sometimes on the app here. Go ahead and comment whatever questions you've got in this category. Okay, here's a good question. Edward says, in your fed state, do you recommend eating one meal with proteins and fat and your next meal with proteins and fats? Okay, so I will kind of answer that in a wraparound way. So his question was essentially like, do I recommend eating, like breaking up kind of the macronutrients with my meals? And the short answer to that is yes, I pretty much do. Okay, what I typically recommend with that, I almost always break my fast with just protein, sometimes with protein and a little bit of moderate or low glycemic carbohydrates, right? And then what I'll do is like 60, 90 minutes later is when I'll have a larger, more robust meal. I don't like breaking my fast specifically with fats or even with protein and fats. I like waiting a little bit because I know that digestively it's pretty difficult to break down those fats, okay? Pancreatic lipase, all this stuff, it takes time. And when you're just like throwing your stuff in your system right when you break a fast, I like to think that, okay, it needs a little bit more time for this. So typically what I'll do is break my fast with just lean protein, and then later on I'll do proteins and fats. And then if I'm having carbs, then maybe I'll add carbs and protein. Now, I catch some flack for talking about this sometimes because it's really nebulous science, but if we really want to be forward thinking with this stuff, sometimes we have to kind of think through the cloudiness and kind of think about what makes sense, right? I'm not a fan of mixing fats and carbs together. Fats and carbs, I don't feel like they're, can everyone hear me okay? There's a couple people that said they can't hear me very well. And someone asked if I'm in a Motel 6. No, I'm just in a bedroom, just trying to stay quiet while the kids are napping. So I just want to make sure everyone can hear me before I kind of go, yeah, everyone says I'm good. I think it might be your audio. So if someone, let's see, make sure. Let me know, guys, audio good? Just give me a thumbs up. Is it good? Okay, everyone says they can hear you. So I think we're good. All right, I'm not going to worry about it then. So with this, it's just a very important piece that we kind of have to remember, right? So coming back to sort of when we eat and when we time our meals, if you combine fats and carbs together, you have this insulin spike that comes with carbs along with fat coming into the equation too. Okay, our cells are designed to really process one fuel preferentially at a time. It does not mean that they cannot process two fuels at a time, but they ideally like to run on both. Now, in the case of overfeeding, right, if you're eating a lot at one time, there's something called metabolic gridlock. And what it simply is that the transporters that it takes to bring carbohydrates into a cell are entirely different from the transporters that it takes to bring fats inside of a cell. The body generally wants to preferentially run on one or the other. So food coming in, like say you were fasting for 36 hours and you just got really hungry and you just ate a big pizza, you could potentially end up with this metabolic gridlock. What happens with metabolic gridlock? Are you gonna keel over? No, it's not that sort of situation. Okay, with that, what happens is you end up assimilating less nutrients, but you have a higher likelihood of potentially storing because the body sort of shuts off some of these walls, right, where it just doesn't get the nutrition in, so things circulate and have a higher likelihood of storing. So that's why it's why is it so hard when you can just separate your fats and carbs, right? It's not that hard. It's if you do eat carbs, great. Eat your carbs and protein with one meal. If you eat fats, then eat your fats and protein with one meal. It's do we have to have them together with one meal? It's we have this common school of thought that we need to be combining a beautiful avocado with a beautiful chicken breast along with a beautiful sweet potato. When in reality, it's I don't think the body cares if it's all coming in at once, right? I think the body wants it maybe over a longer period of time. So if I was eating carbs, maybe I'll have the chicken and the sweet potato, and then maybe the next meal I'll have the chicken and the avocado. And it's it doesn't mean that one meal is ketogenic and one meal is not. It means, okay, I'm trying to just figure out what works best at that specific time. And when you are fasting, when you break that fast, you're so sensitive to what you take in. My guess and my hypothesis is that you're going to be more sensitive to this kind of stuff. So anyway, Michael Beeson says, I wish you did more food haul vids. I hear you loud and clear. We just filmed another one that's going to go live in a week. That last Costco video just crushed, and it was just a quick reminder that, wait a minute, people love these things. It's interactive. If you also like these live broadcasts, let me know, because I'm only going to do them if you like them. I went almost a year without doing a live broadcast because so many people said they didn't like them. They were just nope, we just want the regular videos with the quick tidbits. We don't like 30-minute videos. I hear you loud and clear, okay? But at the same time, there is a quote from Henry Ford that I love and I try to live by. And that quote from Henry Ford says, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. Okay, let that sink in for a second. It means sometimes if you ask the masses what they want, you get a warped perception, you get a warped response, when in reality, I need to kind of drive this and be okay, if I think things are interesting, I'm going to put them out there. And you can take them or you can leave them. No one's forcing you. Yeah, a lot of people are saying love the broadcast. So if you guys like these, make sure you comment and let me know. But it's also really important, this is sincere. After this broadcast is done, it is really important you leave a comment in the regular comment section, not just the live feed, because what happens with that is that then that actually sticks, and then I can go back and actually look at these and I can actually read the comments and reply. Okay. Someone brought up a really good question. I'm going to touch on this for a second, talking about skinny fat. Anyone here feel like they're skinny fat? Okay, skinny fat is where you're not obese, you're not 300 pounds like I was. You're skinny, but you're puffy, you're soft, you have pudge around the middle, you're skinny fat. Anyone here skinny fat? If you are, just say skinny fat. Okay, it's pretty anonymous here on YouTube. So if you want me to talk about that, I can kind of dive into some of the strategies that I've given people that are skinny fat, because it sounds funny, but it actually is a very real thing. And I do think that there is a different direction that you can go with things, because you might be saying I don't need to lose 100 pounds, bro. I'm not I don't even need to lose 15. I just need to fix this. Okay. And that is really where I do think intermittent fasting shines so much. Okay. Because when you start breaking down how it works for someone that is skinny fat, you're not necessarily putting them in this radical deficit. You are, okay, I'm just going to cut right to the chase. You don't want to hear me talk about crap. Bottom line is, for skinny fat people, I think alternate day fasting is very effective. Okay, alternate day fasting where you're doing almost one meal a day every other day. Okay, because the thing with skinny fat people is that you need to lose fat, but at the same time, you also need to build muscle. And my concern, if you were to just go straight OMAD or just go straight intermittent fasting, is that you're not giving yourself an opportunity to actually get that muscle protein synthesis and the muscle protein synthesis balance over muscle protein breakdown. And what I mean by that is on the days that you are not fasting, you can almost use those as like your bulking days, but don't go crazy on the calories, right? So with that, it's a very interesting school of thought. It's like, okay, I need to micromanage my diet for a minute. And you might be thinking, I just give me the secret sauce, make this easy. I'm sorry, guys, this is not easy stuff. At the end of the day, like if you want to just lose weight and have a low BMI, just eat less. It's not simple, right? You use a million channels and they'll tell you simple calories in, calories out. But I'm trying to get more granular because I feel like if we look at a micro level, we understand it better and we adhere better. So I find that like an OMAD or 2MAD, like 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, every other day gives you the opportunity to have your aggressive, like miniature cut days and then your miniature bulking days. Because you need the calories to build muscle, but I don't want you overdoing the calories. And we tend to think of like bulk and cut in like these giant 3-month periods of time. I'm going to go and I'm going to lose a bunch of weight. Well, if you try to lose a bunch of weight and you're not adequately training, you're not adequately getting the protein intake, you're not going to build the muscle. And if you're skinny fat, one of the most important things that you can do is probably build the muscle. But arguably, you want to lose the fat at the same time. Okay, so I hope that that answers that question because I think that was there's a lot of people that really wanted to hear that. Guys, if you don't mind, continue to smash that thumbs up button. There should be a like button, should be a thumbs up button. It would just helps the channel out a lot, helps get the content out there. When I do these live broadcasts, it helps me understand that this is what people want to see. Let's see, Alan Roberts. I'm not familiar with Alan Roberts. Okay, Stinky says, Thomas, if I can't stop eating any earlier than 9 p.m., what should I eat to lose weight while eating late in the evening? Yeah, you know, sometimes I put this content out there and I get concerned that maybe I scare people too much about eating at night. I do think that eating at night is not the best thing in the world, but there's certain situations where it's just not possible, right? I feel like the problem with eating at night is more about the carbohydrates at night right before bed. And it's just what it does to the brain, right? So here's what's interesting. I'll tell you a little story. And I know people are saying, don't tell me a story, just get to the point. We don't care about your life. We just want the facts. I get it. I'm just a resource. That's all I am, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes having this like a relatable situation can help out. Why does Mike, someone keeps saying drink water. If it's because my lips are chapped, that's just like the state of being for me. Like I just always have chapped lips. It's just kind of been that way since I was like 11 years old. So anyway, or do I, whatever. Point is, for a long time, I would make sure, no matter what, that I would stop eating at like 6 p.m. And it improved my sleep quite a bit. But I did find that it wasn't improving it ridiculously. Like I was like, this is kind of frustrating. So I would take like tryptophan supplements before bed. I'd take like 500 milligrams of tryptophan to help with sleep. And that helped a little bit. And then what I started realizing was that some days I was training pretty heavily, like pretty extensive training, like a lot. Like I would do, 90, 120 minute Peloton rides. And then I would also lift and do, we're talking some of these days with like 4 hours of training, which I know is not realistic, but I have different goals now that I've lost weight. My point is that if I didn't have a little bit of food before bed, I actually didn't sleep well. And I'm sitting here getting inside my head being like, I see all this research saying like food before bed is not good. And then it kind of dawned on me that like the problem that comes with the food is A, the volume, and B, is going to be the glycemic response. So I'm like, what if I have just a small, like quarter cup of Greek yogurt with maybe like a scoop of unflavored, unsweetened protein powder, or maybe just like a little bit of collagen in it, right? Like what if I did that? Would do that like a half an hour before bed. We're talking, that's like what, 120 calories? And I would actually sleep really good on days that I had high training volume. But if I did that on days that I did not have high training volume, it didn't really work. So my point in saying that to you is actually, I think you can get through and get away with a lot if it's protein and high protein. I really do. And I know that's cliche to say, but I know that people get into these situations where like, dude, I just have to eat at night. Like I have no choice. My schedule doesn't allow me. So at that rate, I think if you can get away with like not having high amounts of carbohydrates and just go high protein and moderate amounts of fat, because that's the other thing is people like have a fat bomb or something high fat before bed. People forget that the digestive load of fats what it does within your body actually could wake you up more. So protein in this case is going to be better. Okay, so anyway, let's see what other questions coming up. What about milk? What milk do I drink? Is there a milk substitute? Okay, this is interesting. This is a place where I've had a lot of growth too. I don't drink conventional milk, but I do drink raw milk. I don't drink a lot of it because raw milk is still going to be pretty high carb. So I might have like 4 to 6 ounces of raw milk a day. I'm a really firm believer that, when you heat something, pasteurize it, you're kind of denaturing a lot of the benefits there. So raw milk, if you can get your hands on it, sometimes like in Mississippi, certain states, it's really hard to get raw milk. Otherwise, like another thing that you can do is just drink straight up raw cream and just dilute it with a little bit of raw milk. And then that way you're keeping the carb content a little bit lower. It helps you out. Lisa, a good question here. Thomas, you mentioned sorry about the finger here. I'm eating keto OMAD, 1,600 calories a day. Is that technically overfeeding? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. You're probably fine at that range. Like that 1,600 calorie range, if anything, is probably on the low side. And I guess this is a good point for me to bring up. Like overfeeding is not necessarily just being like, oh, you're having too many calories in one day. When I say overfeeding, a lot of times I mean like just these big boluses of food, right? So for example, the standard American diet is a high carbohydrate, a high saturated fat diet. And a lot of times when I talk about the standard American diet, and I'm talking about overfeeding, and even when I'm talking about saturated fat, I've caught a lot of flack for talking about saturated fat in a not so positive way. And I'm not saying that, no, don't eat saturated fat. No, what I mean is that when saturated fat is combined with these processed carbs, it is a problem, okay? And it is very documented that it's a problem. So it's like, just because on keto you can eat butter and not have as much of an issue does not give you a license to eat butter along with a bunch of chips, right? Now that's very difficult to explain in lots of content. But what I say with that is a simple example of overfeeding. Like you're taking in a lot of calories of carbohydrates and a lot of calories of fats at one time, causing this metabolic gridlock. So if you're consuming 1,600 calories in a day and you're even compressed in like a 4, 6, 8 hour eating window, you're probably just fine. Okay, I want to kind of jump into another way to break a plateau because we have new people that have hopped on here. So I'm kind of recapping here. We've talked about, okay, being able to switch up your eating periods. We've talked about taking little bits of breaks here and there. The next thing I want to talk about, and I've talked about this before, is the 5-2 approach. Okay, now a lot of you have probably heard, go ahead and comment. Have you heard of the 5-2 approach? If you have, just say yes, 5-2, or just say 5-2. I just want to know a general idea of how many people, or if you haven't heard of it, say no, I have not. I just want to hear, again, I'm going to talk about it anyway, but it's, a lot of people saying no, so it's good. Yeah, as people say they saw my video on it. Now, the 5-2 approach can be interesting, especially if you're doing like this 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of thing. Now, the reason that I say this is because a 5-2 approach is great because it forces you to sort of reset a little bit. So the 5-2 approach is where you are fasting essentially for, well, you could actually do it either way. So I'm going to talk about it both ways. You can either eat regular for 5 days out of the week and then aggressively fast for 2 days out of the week, or you can do the opposite where you do like, 2 meals a day or something for 5 days a week and restrict calories aggressively 5 days a week and then eat ad libitum as much as you really want on the weekends, right? So there's 2 ways of doing it. One would technically be 5-2 and one would technically be 2-5, but believe it or not, they both have very similar results, which is kind of interesting. I actually so for me, just so you guys know my background, like I came out of this like corporate healthcare world. So I was like in a very like 9-to-5 type corporate setting, pretty much like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that it was basically a glorified cubicle. It was like one of those Herman Miller workstations next to a window, but it was still a friggin' cubicle. Anyway, point is that it was actually really easy for me most of the time to diet those days. It was on the weekends that it was tough for me. Some people see it the opposite. So for me, it was like I was in this situation where it was just easy for me to diet those days. So 5-2 is like where you actually do get pretty aggressive on your weekdays. And then on the weekends, you kind of let your hair down. You really don't track calories at all. You just eat whatever you want on the weekends, assuming you're very, very, very strict and controlled and calculated during the week. The opposite is where you are sort of loose and flexible during the week, and then you basically just fast throughout the whole weekend, which is something that I know a number of people pretty well that do that, right? Like they actually try that, where they eat moderately well throughout the week, and then they fast over the weekends. Here's the problem with that, if I can really be honest. I feel like by fasting through just the weekend, you do kind of set yourself up for like eating disorder type mentality, because you just like that's like an aggressive lever to pull to sort of counteract maybe crappy eating during the week. And I think that it's a lot easier to say, okay, for 5 days out of the week, I'm going to just keep it under control. And then throughout the weekend, I'm going to just relax. And it's really good for people that have kids, because like, I think it's really important to show kids like, hey, like I can be strict, but I can also turn it off and enjoy life, because we're human. Like, okay, let's see. There's some other questions or any questions that are coming up surrounding 5.2. This would be a great time to dive into this. If you guys don't mind, please do hit that thumbs up button, guys. Please, please, pretty please. Let's see. How can I justify this? I don't understand the question. Just justify it because you want to do it. Let's see. I cut back to 1 calories a day on. That's Leon says he cuts to 1,000 calories a day on cheat days. That makes sense. Arcadia says chicken is inflammatory in a lot of cases, high omega-6. Yeah, it's still negligible though. I still would go for leaner chicken if that was the case. Would 5.2 knock you out of ketosis? Yes, it would. I mean, that's a caveat here. But here's the thing. Like, just because you're in ketosis doesn't necessarily mean that you need to like go out of ketosis. And just because you're in ketosis doesn't mean that you can't have cheat days within ketosis. I think that's kind of a gray area there, right? People think, oh, if I'm in ketosis, then it's automatically like whatever I eat within this macronutrient range is fine. I don't think that's the case. Like if you're in ketosis, there's still garbage food in ketosis, right? So if you're in ketosis on the weekends, maybe those are your days to eat those more garbage keto foods and get your calories up. Okay. But if that's the case, if you are keto adapted, you could probably get back into ketosis pretty quick on that. Someone asked if I use an app to track calories. When I am getting super granular, like prior to speaking at the CrossFit Games a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, yes, like I wanted to get down to 4% body fat. So yeah, I started tracking again. I usually use either MyNet Diary. It's called MyNet Diary. It's like a green app, or I'll use Lane Norton's Carbon app. But again, you could use a piece of paper. Like it's really just, when you're logging food, it's just about what's going on here. Do I do prolonged fasting? Every once in a while, yes. Yes, I do like a 36-hour fast at least once a month now. Let's see. Sorry, a good question came up. Too many events on the weekends, can't fast on those days, on the 5 days. Is it calorie restriction? Yes, it would be, but you could still do like OMAD or 2MAD on those 5 days, or you could still do like 2MAD or standard 16/8 on those other days. Sorry, some good questions have come in. Let me scroll for a second. How many hours does it take to get into ketosis every day if you crash with carbs every day? Well, if you crash with carbs every day, you're probably not getting into ketosis for very long. It all depends on the size of the person. It takes hours. So if you're having a bunch of carbs, you're kicking yourself out, it's going to be hard to come back from that. Sorry, guys, let me scroll here. Do you think doing a beef and butter fast 1 week, then doing a lean protein with lower fat and say cauliflower rice type meals is a good way to approach losing weight? Here's what's interesting. Okay, so M-Bar asked this question. He says, what about doing a beef and butter fast where you're just eating beef and butter 1 week and then kind of being more lean protein the next week? That sounds like, to the naked eye, like, what the heck is this guy talking about? That sounds super crazy. It's not that far-fetched, actually. It's actually not that far-fetched, because some of the ways that I break through the best plateaus, and this was going to kind of lean into my next one, is by actually taking periods of time where I go higher fat, higher protein, and then go really high protein, lower fat. Now, it is an extension of what is called a protein-sparing modified fast. It's very aggressive, and it's actually often used in like medical weight loss situations. Now, what exactly is a protein-sparing modified fast? So protein-sparing modified fast is where you are essentially eating relatively low calorie, sometimes very low calorie, with just high levels of super like lean protein, like practically no fat coming in, just lots of chicken, lots of fish. It's aggressive and it's not fun, okay? However, I say this like, it's very effective and for short amounts of time. So during this last cut of mine, you probably can see on my Instagram, I don't know if anyone follows me on Instagram, I would recommend, I don't like Instagram. I don't like it as a platform. I think they won't give me a blue check mark to save my life because they say I'm not big enough name, whatever. That's just personal beef, but like I just don't like them as a platform. Point is, I do put a lot more of like personal stuff and like short things and like what I'm currently doing with my diet on Instagram. So on Instagram, you can just literally type in my name, Thomas DeLauer. It's like a little orange thumbnail, a little orange background with my picture on it. So if you're on Instagram, definitely recommend that just because it's just different content. I'm not trying to like push people over there. It's just different from what I put on YouTube. So if you were watching me on Instagram with that, I was talking about like sort of leading up to getting down to like 3 or 4% body fat over the summer, which people were saying, Thomas, you look so sunken in. Well, yeah, because I was at like 3% body fat. Of course, I'm going to look sunken in. It's the way it looks. But anyway, with that, how I got to that was taking like 1 week of a little bit above maintenance calories in a ketogenic state, high fat, high protein. Okay, so my calories for me at that rate were like 3,600 because I'm pretty active. Okay, then the next week, I would bring it down to like 1,500 calories, super low calorie for me, for how active I was, with practically no fat. It was like just mounds of lean fish, lean beef, and lean chicken. And it was just some veggies in there, right? So crazy high amounts of that, which again, sounds radical. And it is, I'm not gonna lie, like it totally is radical. But it worked so crazy well because I'm not crash dieting. I'm keeping my calories high 1 week and then keeping my protein so high that I'm not wasting muscle. So protein sparing modified fasting, there is a reason why it works so well in the medical community. There is also a reason why it is generally a medically supervised diet because people go very low calorie. And but the crazy thing is I actually felt great on it. It's just, it was a lot of work, right? Like talk about like not really being able to go out to eat, just getting chicken breasts. So just again, it's totally your prerogative, right? Yeah, I know. Real truth is 3% is not healthy, brother. Dude, trust me, I get it. It was like to get down there for like a week. I do these things now and then just to prove to myself that I can. It doesn't, full disclaimer, yes, for men, getting below 5% is not a healthy place to be. So it's just one of those things where like from a fitness angle, I do it every now and then. What's the ratio for the 5-2 calorie wise? That's a good question, Steve. So coming back to the 5-2 approach, I would usually say like calories, probably like 3-to-1. Okay, 3 calories, 3 being the higher amount, and then kind of moving into the lower calories being a 1. After 3 years of keto, I'm now having trouble getting back to keto in the last 8 months. Sugar addiction is real. It is. My suggestion for you, if you're battling sugar addiction, is cut out the processed sugar first. And this is going to sound crazy. Again, I'm full of crazy stuff, right? But sometimes crazy works. And you know what? I'm not going to lie. Like people might unsubscribe from me saying this because I sound like a conceited prick when I say this, but I stay sub 8%. I have for the last 10 years. Like I'm stay lean. I know how to keep muscle and stay lean. I like to think that even some of the experimental stuff that I do has some merit to it. Okay. One of the ways that I combat sugar cravings, if I ever start going off the rails, is I give myself a license to eat unlimited amounts of fruit. And that sounds crazy. It sounds bad. But what I find is that I get my sugar fix, and next thing I know, I'm like, you know what? I can't eat much more than like 3 cups of fruit. Like you think like, oh man, yes, I have a license to eat as much fruit as I want. And then you're like, when you actually eat 3 cups of blueberries, you're like, I don't have a sweet tooth and I can't do anymore. And then next thing you know, you're like, you know what? It's kind of cool. I don't really need this anymore. Let's just move along. So I really do suggest trying that. Like if you really are battling with, when I say sugar cravings, I mean the people that are like really like almost out of control. It's very, very effective. So try saying like, I'm going to give myself a license to eat unlimited amounts of raspberries and blueberries. And if you eat 3 cups of them, if you eat 5 cups of them, big whoop-de-doo. You got like 100 carbs at the most, and you got like 500 calories. Like you're not going to make yourself fat. Let's put it that way. People are going to say, what fatty liver, fructose and fatty liver. No, okay, it doesn't work like that. The fructose needs, well, the reason that the fructose can go to a fatty liver has to do with something that's called fructokinase C. And that is only when you need copious amounts of this enzyme to process copious amounts of fructose coming in at once. So unless you are like literally eating 4 or 5 cups of blueberries at once, you're not going to run into that problem. Okay, so don't freak out about it. If you're doing keto, disregard what I'm saying. I'm just talking about if you have a sugar addiction. Man, some of these super chats that are coming in, that was really cool. Race Mode Daily, thanks for the $20 super chat. I really do appreciate that, man. You just bought me dinner. Thank you. Yeah, let's see. Do you think doing 16/8 fasting every day is good for chronic inflammation and joint pain? Alice in Triathlon Land. I love that name, by the way. That's a good question. In the beginning, yes. And I think that's what a lot of people feel, right? Like they start 16/8, they get this reduction in inflammation because their calories reduce and they have these defined eating periods. But you probably find over time it doesn't have the same benefit, doesn't have the same effect. So what I typically recommend is, okay, if you do 16-8, then the next week, or maybe do it for a month, and then the next week do like alternate day fasting, and next month maybe do like, just switch it up, because I think you're going to find that in order to get the anti-inflammatory effect, you need to have ketone levels high, right? So Alice says, why do my lips always look dry? I don't know, maybe I should go to the doctor. Or maybe you guys just shouldn't trust me because I have dry lips. Damn, Thomas and his stupid lips. Let's see, sorry, some other questions coming in here. Why are guys looking at it? Really, oh, thanks, man. Which supplements don't break my fast? That's a simple one. If they are oil-based or they're soft gels, then I would not recommend having those during a fast. If they are water-soluble, vitamin C's, things like that, we could get granular with should you have them, should you not, but generally those aren't going to break a fast, right? Sorry, let me put some chapstick on. No. What is up? What is your guys' obsession with my lips, people? Like, dry lip sync ships. You guys are, I'm not gonna lie, you guys are a little weird. Do I go to farms to buy my food? It's a good question. Whenever possible, I do. Yes. So I spend most of my time up in Lake Tahoe. I live up there, kind of just up in the mountains. That's why, probably the real reason why my lips are chapped most of the time, because I live at 7,000 feet and the air is thin and it's dry, and you try keeping up with that, right? So anyway, point is down the hill towards like the Carson City area, there's some really, really, really good places for me to get like raw milk, raw dairy. So when it comes to dairy and things like that, yes, I definitely like hardcore. That needs to, as much as possible, be from local farms. Same kind of thing with meat, local farms, eggs, definitely like local farms as much as possible. Veggies, I don't really worry about it as much because, I don't know, I just try to shop organic whenever possible. What is the scientific evidence for keeping the body guessing and weight loss? Okay, so with keeping the body guessing, it's not necessarily about the weight loss. Okay, with keeping the body guessing, it's specific to fasting, because the fasting benefits, and this guy, by the way, I mean, he's asked this a couple times. I think he's trying to poke holes, and I love it when people poke holes. Like, that's where I shine, right? So what's the evidence behind keeping the body guessing? What's the evidence behind me ripping the headphones out of my ears when I get passionate? What that is, what we're trying to address here, okay, if you are trying to keep the body guessing, it's in a fasting perspective, you're trying to maintain the epinephrine adrenaline response you get from fasting. We're not trying to say that keeping the body guessing is going to magically make you lose weight. But I will say, how many of you have noticed that when you start something new, a new training regime, a new diet regime, in the beginning, it works, right? So, like, why is that? But then after a while, it stops working. What's going on there? Well, there has something to be said maybe about switching it up and maybe newbie gains with new things. So anyhow, the point is, with fasting, it's all about keeping the shock to the system so that your epinephrine is higher, right? So that you're getting the catecholamine effect. White Mamba says, has the most shredded physique, and weirdos commenting on dry lips. Guess you have to find something to hate on. I don't even know if they're hating. It's just like weird. People comment about the weirdest things. Usually it's the dark circles under my eyes. Well, I don't know. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Maybe that's why I have dark circles under my eyes. Maybe because I'm human and I actually support my family. I don't know. Maybe I actually work hard and take care of my family. Who knows? Let's see. We've got, how often should I be pooping if I'm doing one meal a day? Sounds like a funny question, but it comes up all the time. Generally speaking, if you're doing one meal a day, one poop a day. Okay. So they say on average, like, healthiest is 2 poops a day. I don't know a lot of people that 2 poop a day, right? Like, I'm usually a 1, sometimes a 2 poop a day person. So I think if you're 1 meal a day, if your system's working well and you're adequately hydrated, there you go. Oh my gosh, Mr. Baker, that made me crack up. It rubs the lotion on its lips so it gets the hose again. That's awesome. Good old Joe Dirt reference there. Let's see, what do I think of grass-fed ground beef? I'm a big fan of that, obviously. See, I've got time for 2 more questions, okay? Do high blood ketones mean you're burning more fat? No, it means you're going through more ketogenesis, okay? So I talk about this quite a bit in my videos, but here's something that I hope everyone is listening for. Chase results, don't chase ketones, okay? If I was chasing ketones, I would not be as lean as I am because my ketone levels are not that high, okay? My point in saying that is that Your ketones are just an indicator of how much you are creating in the way of ketones in the liver. Okay, does not matter. Well, it does matter, but not at the end of the day. Marvel or DC? Well, I'm a DC guy all the way, guys. Let's see. Does a carb day once a month prevent insulin resistance on keto? That's a very intellectual question, I have to say. And it takes a little bit of clarity because I know sometimes I concern people. And it's great because I've got a nice big captive audience right now, so I can say, just so you guys know, like the videos that release on my channel, like it's not like a coaching system, right? So like you guys have probably figured this out. You're smart. People that are probably watching this are asking good questions, I can see. If you followed every single video that I ever released, like you would be eating either zero things or everything, right? Like the idea is I put this information out there because there are things that I've done at different times. I will not put something out there if I have not experimented with it myself. That is my promise to you. If, excuse me, if I have not tried something or see how it works in my body, I'm not going to put it out there to you. But that doesn't mean that you apply a video from 2 years ago alongside concurrently with a video from today. Like if I'm talking about, hey, doing strict periods of keto with no fruit, and then today I release a video on fruits and insulin resistance, I can see how that seems confusing, right? But the whole point is that you take this and apply it at different points in time, okay? So that's a very important thing. Now, getting into the question that someone had asked, does a carb day once a month prevent insulin resistance? That comes from the fact that when you do low carb for a long period of time, you become what is called physiologically insulin resistant, which means the cells within your tissues start to reject glucose. But they reject glucose because there isn't an inherent need for it. And it's prioritizing glucose to go to the brain. So basically, if you're doing keto, your body's like, I don't need this glucose. So let's shuttle it and reallocate it to the brain. It's a great, beautiful, beautiful thing. But eventually what can happen is if you don't use it, you lose it. So you lose some of the transport ability to get glucose into a cell. So the concern is that if you do keto for 3 months and then you decide to not do keto for a couple of months, you're going to have an awkward period of time where your body tries to recalibrate to use those glucose again. So it is a keto-generated insulin resistance, and it's not a bad thing, but it is a real thing, and it's temporary. So people always say, like, well, how often do I need to have carbs to stave this off? I usually recommend having like carbs in a small amount, like as much as you can get away with, as long as they are non-processed, healthy carbs. So I usually say fruit, right? Eat as much fruit as you can get away with while still remaining in ketosis. It's simple as that, right? So use your ketone meter as a barometer for that. Fruit after a workout, measure it, see what's out, right? So that's my general rule of thumb. But a cheat meal once a month will probably help you out too. But at the end of the day too, that can also do some damage because you're going from like hardcore strict to like all of a sudden just like going off the rails and right back to strict again. You're better off to dabble here and there, keep the body guessing a little bit. Yes, Jimmy Kimmel does do 5-2. And Alicia and John Gillespie, you could just eat liver, like Liver King. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day. I have a video coming out about Liver King this week, FYI, guys. I'm going to end this on some fun stuff. Who's excited for the Liver King video? Anyone a fan of Liver King here? Anyone, what's you guys' take on it? Liver King, like him, love him, think he's a fraud? What do you guys think? Let's let some comments come in. This will be interesting. Just waiting. Okay, we got a lot of people that like Liver King. Some people think he's a fraud, not a fan, but still interesting. Yeah, so my take on Liver King, just call it what it is he knows exactly what he's doing. He's a smart marketer. He knows exactly what he's doing. I've interviewed him on my channel. I've had offline conversations with him. He's a very intelligent person. So business mind, absolutely. He knows what he's doing. And he's created an amazing brand. It's allowed him to have a tremendous platform. Is it over the top? 100% it's over the top. We know it's over the top and people are eating it up. But is the message, generally speaking, okay, what is the net impression that he's leaving people? The net impression that he's leaving upon people is live close to the earth, okay, eat organ meats. I think the net impression is decent and is probably doing more good than harm. I don't think he's encouraging people to do crazy things that he's doing. But it's interesting, right? So on that, maybe... Who thinks, I don't know. I was thinking I could just become like Testicle King or something like that, right? Like just like I mean, I think you're going to come out with all these other, I saw someone on Instagram the other day that called themselves the Blood Sugar King. Like people are just making themselves king of everything, right? It's like, you could just like create any organ and become the king of it. But he did it in a way that I think really set, he got people's attention on liver. He really started spleen king. I love that. I'm gonna be the lung king, or the like the larynx king, thyroid king. Point is that there's little bits and pieces you have to take from what he says, and so, but it's too much for me to watch. Too much for me to watch. But what I do is I did have a video coming out later this week where I took points that I think are valid of his and points that I don't think are valid of his, and I put them in a video in a very sort of eloquent way because I try not to like put people down. Anyhow, oh my gosh, he's the best one. Brebuff Garcia says, the dry lips king of Lake Tahoe. Yes. Okay, guys, I gotta hop off. Kids are waking up. Please don't forget to leave a comment after this video is done in the regular comment section. All right, dry lip king out.